Hi, friends, and welcome to this new episode of the Secrets of a Witch podcast with me, Sabrina Scott. In this podcast, I talk about witchcraft, magic, spirituality, love, life, healing, and everything in between. If you're new here, welcome, and if you are not new, also welcome. So, for today's episode, I wanted to talk about something that bothers me. It's something that this may be like a little bit controversial, so stay with me here. And this is inspired by certain conversations I've had with folks when they talk about themselves and their life and whatever situations they find themselves in. And so what I've heard sometimes is people will say, yeah, I'm too nice. Have you heard that before? Have you said that before? And so I hate when people say this because I feel like when folks say, oh, I'm just too nice, like this bad thing happened, that bad thing happened, some crazy shit went down, it was terrible, and I'm just too nice. It happened because I'm too nice. And I call bullshit on this. I call 100% bullshit on people who say that. I feel like it's totally fucking wrong. So you're not too nice. You just have no boundaries. And so maybe this isn't you. Maybe you listening, whoever you are, maybe you do have amazing boundaries. And if you do, high five from me, that's awesome. But in this episode, I'm going to be addressing those people, whoever they happen to be. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone in your life. Someone who uses I'm too nice as an excuse and an explanation for why their life sucks, why they're miserable, or why they were in shitty situation number 582. We all know that person or have known that person. Thankfully, my life is as such where I don't actually really know anyone anymore who thinks or behaves this way. But that was an intentional expunging on my part. But let's talk about this, right? This idea that niceness is an excuse. And so, let's break it down, right? So niceness. I think it's possible to be nice and also have boundaries. I think it's possible to be kind and also have very strong, very strict, very intensely enforced boundaries. It's possible to be both. So we can be nice and have good boundaries, but that isn't usually what I see when people just say, oh, I'm too nice. I'm too nice. I'm so nice. This person walked all over me. I had this really shitty 5 roommates for 5 years and it was so bad and I just let them be insane because I'm too nice. I did all the cleaning for the entire house because I'm too nice. I paid everyone's rent when they couldn't because I'm too nice. It's no. That has nothing to do with niceness. Having no boundaries has nothing to do with niceness. It has everything to do with having no boundaries. That is its own thing. And so we also have to look at what causes a lack of boundaries. I think it's different for everybody. But some of the things I've observed is people who are people pleasers and who have no boundaries. It's often due to a few different factors. One of them is a fear of loss, a fear of rejection, a fear of being alone, a fear of confrontation, a fear of being disliked. Because when we say no to people, we are at risk of all those things, right? We're at risk of people not liking us. We're at risk of a friendship ending. We're at risk of so many different things that can be really scary and uncomfortable. But part of having self-worth and having boundaries, part of that is being able to have those experiences and know that we are going to end up okay on the other side of it. Part of being a healthy adult is to learn to tolerate discomfort, to learn and to know that whatever challenging social situation that we happen to be in, whether that's a breakup or a friendship kerfuffle or roommate drama, that we can survive it. We're an adult. We've been through things before, and we'll be through things again, and it will be okay. Is it the end of the world if someone doesn't like us? Absolutely not. Is it the end of the world if we have a breakup? Absolutely not. Is it the end of the world if someone rejects us and thinks that we suck because we said no to them? No, it's not. It just is what it is, and we can move on. And we know that we can withstand that discomfort. And so whenever people say I'm too nice, I do see it as a bit of a red flag. Because aside from the no boundaries thing, what I also observe with that is someone who is not able to take personal responsibility for their own behavior and the consequences of their behavior. This is why it's really important to really listen to other people and how they talk about themselves and their lives, because we can really get a lot of clues about how they see the world, how they see themselves, how they see other people, based on how did they describe all those things. So when someone says, yeah, I'm too nice, like this horrible thing happened, this person treated me this particular way a million times again and again, and I'm too nice. What that means is they are putting full blame on the other person or other people in that situation. They are not acknowledging that they allowed that to happen again and again. And I know some of you might be like, Sabrina, this is dangerous. It sounds like you're victim blaming, and I'm not victim blaming. Let me explain why. So when it comes to things that are really serious, like, rape and sexual assault and stuff like that, obviously no one ever asks for that. And abuse psychology is really challenging. It's really hard to break out of that. That is not what this podcast episode is about. I definitely could make a whole other episode about that specifically. What I'm talking about is not abuse. What I'm talking about is just basic interpersonal conflict between people, between groups, where abuse is not present, but things aren't really going great. That is what I'm talking about in this episode. So we're going to shelf the abuse psychology, which is its own thing, and just talk about regular, boring life conflict, because not every conflict between people qualifies as abuse. I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind. And so when people refuse to take accountability for their behavior in basic interpersonal dynamics, that, again, to me is a bit of a red flag to pay attention to. Because that person often will set themselves up as a martyr, as a victim. Woe is me. Everyone's always treating me like crap. Everyone's always taking advantage of me, blah, blah, blah. Woe is me, woe is me. While refusing to take any accountability and responsibility for how their behavior or lack thereof, how their boundaries or lack thereof, how their self-worth or lack thereof has actually been reinforcing their position in that situation. Because as adults in unsatisfying friendships or relationships, we can choose how we behave. We can decide to say, you know what, this isn't working for me. I don't feel valued. I am going to move on. And I think a lot of the reason these folks don't move on is because they're afraid of being alone. They've got a scarcity mentality where they're afraid that there are no other people around who will give them the time of day. And I know this is complicated because people often do tend to believe that due to growing up in an abuse circumstance. So that's like a whole other can of worms that I'm not going to open at this moment. But it's true. And so sometimes folks can end up in just boring conflict situations in a space of learned helplessness that they sometimes can acquire from, let's say, growing up with abuse. So I do have a lot of sympathy for that. I have, a lot of love for people who have survived really terrible things. But at the same time, while we are not responsible for, abuse happening to us, it is our responsibility to learn to heal from that stuff, to take control of our lives, and to reprogram our brains to work in a healthier way that is self-affirming, that is boundaried, that is full of worthiness, and that is always connected to our own personal agency. And I think that's part of what bothers me when people say, oh, I'm too nice. It's like, no, you just are disconnected from your own agency. You're abdicating agency from yourself. And that is not an empowered thing to do. And that's actually, not a very witchy way to live life either. It's not a very spiritually empowered way to live life that believes that magic is real. Because magic is all about connecting with our own agency and creating change within ourselves and the world around us. So all of that, I know, out of hearing someone say, oh, I'm too nice, when they were complaining about something that happened in their life. And so, yes, I do psychoanalyze everything. Yes, I do analyze everything. Comes with the territory of reading a bazillion books about psychology and working on a PhD, God help me, and doing a lot of my own personal work with this has led me to notice a lot of these things that I'm now sharing with you in this podcast. And so maybe you feel called out by this, and if you do, I'm sending you big hugs and big love, because I know it can be really challenging to switch up our programming. I know it can be really fucking hard, for sure, but I also believe in you, and I believe you can do it if you find yourself a little called out by this podcast episode and are like, oh shit. You know what? It's okay. I've been there, and I know that change is possible. And if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I know like 20 people like this, you can also reflect on that. What do you want to do with that information? Do you want to change who you associate with? Do you want to call them out a bit lovingly as a friend? Be like, hey, I'm noticing some of this. Like, what do you think? Or do you want to kind of like slow disappear into the abyss? And obviously, I don't believe that people are disposable. But at the same time, I do believe that it is completely okay to have very high standards for how we live our life, the people in our life, and I think it makes sense to have those high standards when we personally have done a lot of work on ourselves. And I think it's possible to release people without judgment, without malice, without hatred, and just to say, you know what, like we're on different stages of our journey right now, and that is okay. No judgment, but we're just not vibrating on the same frequency at the moment, and that is okay, right? Ultimately, we can't be anyone else's savior. Folks have to step up and take responsibility for themselves. I think it's really important. I'm all about that. So I hope this was helpful. This breakdown of the I'm too nice, that's why bad things happen to me, ridiculous trope that I have heard a bazillion times from folks. Think about boundaries. Think about self-worth. Step into them both. And remind yourself it is possible to be kind. It is possible to be nice. And also at the same time, value your own self enough to stick up for yourself, to speak up against crappiness. and have your own boundaries and have your own vision for what you're available for and what you're not available for. And there's another podcast episode about that, so you can scroll back and listen to it if you want to hear more about that. All right, friends, that's it for today. This has been the Secrets of a Witch podcast with me, Sabrina Scott. You can read more about me at my website, sabrinamscott.com. Say hi on Instagram at sabrinamscott. And of course, check out my new clothing line at shopsabrinamscott.com. That's it, friends. Bye.